I was smart last year. Okay. So in John 7 through 9, we find Jesus at another Jewish festival. This is from my In Search of Jesus study. Much of this narrative occurs in and around the Feast of Tabernacles, a Jewish holiday celebrating the harvest of grape and olives. The feast takes place in September or October. Remember, their calendar is different than ours. We have a lunar calendar. They have, I don't know what kind of calendar, but and so it's a different time each year, but it's always in the fall. Depending on the year, it's in September or October. Because these crops needed protection, farmers would build huts in the field during the harvest. In recognition of this fact, and as a reminder of Israel's desert wandering, people coming to Jerusalem for the feast would build makeshift huts to live in for the week. These booths gave the feast its name. It's called the Feast of Booths or the Feast of Tabernacles. Tabernacle, and hear me on this because people get this wrong every year. Tabernacle doesn't refer to the tabernacle, the tent that was their worship place. It refers to a booth. It refers to just a building, a small hut. And so sometimes it's called the Feast of Tabernacles. Sometimes it's called the Feast of Booths. Same thing in either case. So two of the primary features of the feast were the water drawing ritual and the lamp lighting ritual. Jesus is going to use this occasion and the ritual specifically to reveal to the crowds who he is, the source of living water and the light of the world. So all of what Jesus is about to say is very much tied up in this feast, in this Jewish festival called the Feast of the Jews. Your books need to be open to the teacher lesson, please. So we're in somewhere in late September or early October, and it's time for the Feast of Booths or the Feast of Tabernacles. And Jesus, and I'm not gonna go any farther than that on that. The curriculum does, but that's all you really need to know from this. So Jesus is going to say yes. Oh, thank you so very much. Put it on my very immaculate desk. Thank you. I appreciate it. Were they good for you?
Yes, that's
great. Very good. The award of the week. So Jesus is going to say that he's not going to the feast. So we're going to have to talk about that because he ends up going to the feast. So we'll talk about that. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. So Jesus goes back to Galilee for a time, and he decides not to go to Judea because the Jews are seeking to kill him. And that wouldn't be, it's not time, right? His hour has not yet come. And so there are numerous reasons that scholars have offered for his withdrawal from the public eye, but the main one is that he knew it wasn't his hour had not yet come, and so he wasn't going to go to Jerusalem and get in trouble just yet. So in the fall at this time, it's hot in Israel. It's physically uncomfortable at times, but I don't think that has anything to do with him not going to the feast. I think the text tells us why he's not going to. This is the more important one. The Pharisees are growing more antagonistic. They're becoming more and more opposed to Jesus. And so the common people were becoming more and more infatuated with Jesus. They were increasingly excited about him, wanting to make him their king. And so you've got this clash between not just between Jesus and the Jews, the Jewish leadership, but also the people and the Jewish leadership. It was a powder keg happening here. So we've got the people are excited about making him a king, and we've got Herod is growing more suspicious, and we can see all of these, from our vantage point, we can see all of these sort of different threads coming together. Yeah. So some of these are, the Pharisees were growing more antagonistic is spot on. Some of them may have been true, but really John only mentions one of them, that the Pharisees were growing more antagonistic. Therefore, I'm not willing to speculate beyond that, but that's the true reason why he stayed away from Judea. We're going to skip the next part and just move on. So Jesus' brothers are gonna do what brothers often do. Who has brothers? Especially the boys. Logan ever trash talk?
Yeah, all the time.
Never, right?
I do to him too, though. So.
Yeah. So we're gonna see a little bit of brotherly trash talking in this. Christ needs rest. Yeah, no, he's fine. He needs to train his disciples. I forgot all these were here. Really, those aren't that important. So here's the passage. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now, the Jews' feast of the booths was at hand. That means it was almost time for it. That's what at hand means. So his brothers said to Jesus, "Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For even his brothers did not believe in him. So here's what they're saying. Hey, big shot. Why don't you go down to Judea? Why don't you go to the big city? Why don't you go get famous there and do your works that you're doing? Go walk on the water and feed the people. And so they're not saying, "Oh, thou brother, whilst thou go to Jerusalem and show everyone how wonderful you are." That's not what's going on here, right? And we know that in part because the last thing it says is, "For not even his brothers believe him." They were chiding him. They were teasing him, not saying we believe in you. And so then they urged Jesus to attend the feast. They urged Jesus to go do his miracles in Jerusalem. Now, again, I'm going to take some issue here about this because they fail to understand about his impending death. That is true, but I don't think that's what's going on here. I think these are just brothers that are being I don't know, disrespectful to their eldest brother. And in fact, none of Jesus' family believed in him at this point. That didn't happen until after his resurrection. Maybe his mom, but certainly not his brothers. So they urged Jesus to go to the feast, and they failed to understand the purpose of his not going. Now, so this is verses 6 through 9. I'm gonna tell you the curriculum's take on this, and then I'm gonna give you my take on it. Okay. John said to them, "My hour has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come." After saying this, he remained in Galilee. Now, the take that your curriculum talks about is that it's not time for him to die. His hour has not yet come. Have we heard that before? Mm-hmm. Yes. And his hour has not yet come to die, and so he's not going to the feast because he doesn't want to get arrested, because it's not time for him to get arrested. And all of that is true, that he avoids getting arrested before he's supposed to get arrested, and once he is arrested, he's going to literally intentionally walk right into it. But I don't think that's what's going on here, for two reasons. First of all, he does end up going to the feast. So, and it's just a couple of days later. So I don't think it's the timing of his death. This is not the feast at which he's going to be arrested. Do you think he knows that? Yeah, he absolutely knows that. But then here's the other reason. What is the word that I've told you when he says, my hour has not yet come? Up to this point, what has been that Greek word? Yeah, hora. So my hour has not yet come. Pretty much everywhere in John where we see him saying, my hora has not yet come, he's referring to his death. Here, so my time has not yet come, but your time is always here. And then he says at the end, he says, you go up to the feast. I'm not going to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come. So remember that fully come, because I'm going to get back to that too. It can sound like Jesus is almost fearful to go to the feast, but that's not the case. It also maybe can sound like Jesus is being dishonest. I'm not going. And then he goes. But that's not what's going on here. Here's what Jesus is saying. The word that is used for my time has not yet come here is kairos. So this literally is hour. This literally is time. And it means something different than hora. So what does Jesus mean then when he says that his time has not yet come? What is it that has not come? And here's what he's saying. See where I told you, remember, for my time has not yet fully come? He's saying, I'm not going up to the feast yet. It's not time for me to go to the feast. But I'll go later. Essentially, loosely, Jesus is saying, you go on, I'll catch you later. So he's just saying, I'm not supposed to leave for the feast right now, but I will. So remember that Jesus always did what the Father asked when the Father asked him to do it. And so for reasons I don't think we can know, it was not God's timing for Jesus to leave for the feast right then. And maybe, and we don't know this for sure, maybe it's because if he went with his brothers would have made this big fanfare and caused trouble for Jesus if they would have gone together. I don't know that. I don't think we can know that. But I think Jesus obviously knew the reason. And honestly, I mean, even if you didn't know the reason, the fact that God said it's not time yet was enough reason. I don't know if I've told you this before. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And you're not going to believe me. And you're not going to like what I'm about to say. Don't you love it when I tell you that? There is something that probably, I'm not going to say all of your parents, but most of your parents have said to you that you hate when they say it. And you have vowed, as I did, to never say that. I remember telling you, I will never say that to my daughter. Here's what it is. Because I said so. Am I right? Yeah, you hate that, right? Give me a reason. Guess what? When a legitimate authority gives you a legitimate command, that is a good reason. That they gave you that command, that they told you to do that, or to stop doing that. And they're a legitimate authority, not your little brother. I'm not saying your little brother, right? Their word is enough. And someday, I hope you have lots of kids, and you're going to have a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old who you're asking to have put on their shoes so that you can leave and go to church or whatever it is, and he's giving a temper, having a temper tantrum, and he's going to say, "No, why?" And you are going to say, "Because I said so. I'm not going to reason with a 3-year-old. Just put your shoes on, right? Or let me put them on for you. And so that's what God said. Because he said so, Jesus did as God told him. So Jesus goes up to the feast kind of in secret. He doesn't make a big, see, they say not his time to die, not his purpose to disrupt the city. That second one is possibly part of it. But now Jesus goes up to the feast in secret. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in private. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, "Where is he?" And there was much muttering about him among the people. While some said, "He is a good man," others said, "No, he is leading the people astray." Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly about him. So the Feast of Tabernacles is one of the major feasts of Judaism. It was instituted by God in the Old Testament, and I think there's 7 festivals, 7 feasts, or something like that. The only one that isn't instituted in the Old Testament is what we call Hanukkah, and that was instituted before Jesus' day, because we're going to read about him going to that feast as well. But after in the 400 silent years, I don't know if you've heard about that, but between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament is about 400 years, and that was instituted. And when we get to that story, I'll explain it. But that was instituted not in the Old Testament; it was instituted by the people during that time. So I love this where it says there was much muttering. So. The festival, let's talk a little bit of the festival, was ordained by God in Leviticus, and it lasted 8 days. And as I already told you, around September, I think they're going to be ordained of God, 7 days in the duration. And the Jews lived in booths. They made these huts, and part of that was the population of Jerusalem would swell when they had these feasts that every Jewish male was supposed to go to. And so there wouldn't be enough places for them to stay. But oftentimes, when it wasn't the Feast of Booths, it's a warm climate. They just slept out in the, outside. But the building of the booths had a purpose. It had both a purpose, a physical purpose, like they had a place to stay, but it also had a spiritual purpose. They were building booths in honor of the grape and olive harvest, where honoring the farmers who would build booths to live in during that harvest time. But then also honoring the wandering in the desert when the Jews lived in tents in the desert. So both are being remembered here. It is in Hebrew. It's called Sukkot, and it was a memorial to God for giving them the land and the food that came from the land. So it was a feast of gratitude toward God. And the people were to remember what God had done for his people in the desert. Do you know that one of the most often repeated commandments in the Bible is to remember? Remember what God has done. Remember Christ's sacrifice. Remember who you once were. Remember what God has brought you. Over and over in the Bible, you may have not ever thought of that as a command, but it is to remember. And so this was a feast of remembrance of who God is and his faithfulness to them in the harvest and in the desert, his continued faithfulness. But it's interesting because this is supposed to be this time of gratitude, right? This time of gratitude to God. And we hear this about the Jews. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, "Where is he?" And there was much muttering about him among the people. That's an interesting word, muttering. The Hebrew word There it is. The Hebrew word is kind of a funny word. Is gongasmos. What I love about gongasmos, so when the Hebrews were grumbling against God, grumbling against Moses, and to grumble against Moses was to grumble against God. And God told them as much. So they were grumbling against, we need water. It's hot out here. We need water. So God brings water. We're hungry. We don't have any food. So God brought food. Well, it's just so hard. And they were constantly grumbling and complaining. And the wonderful thing about this word gongasmos is it's almost onomatopoetic. You know what that means? Onomatopoeia? You just have to say it fast. You know what that means? Something that sounds like the word. So crash, bang, right? So it's like the strong as and that's what they were doing. And that's what they were doing. They had the light of the world in front of them. They had the provider of the living water in front of them. And all they could do was grumble against him and mutter about him and complain about him. And so they did not understand, obviously they did not understand who he was and why he was there. And that is part of why Jesus decided to go up to Jerusalem in secret, privately, without making a big fanfare of it. So Jesus goes up to the feast in secret, and now we're going to look at verses 14 through 16. The people marvel at Christ's brilliance. It says this: about the middle of the feast, so 7 days, so maybe 3-4 days in, about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up to the temple and began teaching. The Jews therefore marveled, saying, "How is it that this man has learning when he has never studied?" Jesus answered them, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me." So, rabbinical tradition, and you know this if you remember our video that we watched about when the rabbi says, "Come." The rabbinical tradition was to study under a known scholar. You would go find a rabbi. If you had passed all the tests, if you had done well in school, you would go find a rabbi and say, "May I follow you? May I learn under you?" And so they would study under a known scholar and then use his teaching as a precedent, as a basis for their own teaching as they became rabbis themselves. So the Jews here are questioning which rabbi gave Jesus his religious authority, because you couldn't teach on your own authority. You had to say, "Well, Gamaliel was my rabbi." Ooh. Okay, we'll listen to you. It would be like your pastor saying, "I dropped out of high school and I kind of, flitted around for a while, and just didn't go to school, didn't want to go to school, washed cars for a while, but I'm your pastor now." You're my what? What qualifies you, right, to be my pastor? And that's kind of what they're saying. Like, you're just an artificer, or you're just a carpenter from Galilee. Who are you? Who did you study under that gives you the authority to do this? And so Jesus answers their question. The first question is basically, where did you go to school? And his answer is heaven. Went to school in heaven. Not heaven high school. I don't know if there would be such a place. And then their next unanswered question was, well, who is your teacher? God. High enough for you? God is my teacher. And probably if somebody said that to you, you'd be like, ooh, a little bit crazy, right? And that's what they're thinking too. It reminds me of a story years and years ago. My sister Georgianne, the one that's moving to Switzerland. By the way, I may or may not, well, I'll be here for you. I may or may not be here on Friday. I'm hoping to go to Kansas City to say goodbye. Don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see what happens. So Georgianne was in high school. My parents were at a Presbyterian church, won't name the church, and there was some complaining, some gongismos about the high school Sunday school teacher. His name, I think, was Gary. And my dad was on what's called the session, on the leadership board of the church. And so it came to the board like Gary isn't using the Presbyterian materials with the kids. And so, he's not teaching what he's supposed to teach. And so my dad, a very measured man, very wise man, wanted to find out, well, okay, he's not using the Presbyterian materials. What is he using? And so he went to Georgianne and said, how's Sunday school? Oh, it's great. Gary's great. Yeah, we really like it. So, well, is he using the Presbyterian materials? And here's my sister's answer. This will tell you something about her. A, she's brilliant, and she could be a little sarcastic. She said, he's using the Bible. Is that Presbyterian? And that's kind of what Jesus is saying here. God is my witness. God is my teacher. Is that good enough for you? Is that Jewish enough for you? And so that's the answers that he gives to these people. Just gonna make sure. So they marveled at his brilliance, and then Christ reveals the source of his learning and his divine humility. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. So Christ reveals the source of his learning and his divine humility, and it's from God. So what he's saying here, and I think we're going to have to go just a little bit farther. He accuses the people of seeking to kill him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me? Now that seems like it comes out of left field, right? Like, what? Why is he all of a sudden saying, why do you seek to kill me? Here's what Jesus is saying. He's asking them, what is God's will? And in Judaism, what is God's will? What are they to do? Keep the law, obey the law, right? And so he's saying, what's God's will? It's to keep the law, to obey the law. They aren't keeping the law. For example, you're trying to kill me. You're telling me I'm lawless while you're trying to kill an innocent man. You're the one not keeping the law. So that's basically the point of what Jesus is saying here. We're going to stop there, and we'll pick up here tomorrow, and then we'll figure out what we're doing Friday if I'm not here.